Hi, boys and girls. I have another book about firemen, and it is called The Firehouse Light. If you look at this book and the way people are dressed in that type of vehicle, do you think this book happened like today or maybe long ago? When I look at the way this little boy is dressed and I look at the type of truck the firemen have, I feel like this is probably a story from the past. So it didn't happen like today. It would be a story from a time maybe when your grandparents were kids, or in your case, maybe your great-grandparents. My grandparents would be alive. So it says a long time ago. Well, look at that. There's a clue that we're right. It is a story from the past, so that's pretty cool. A long time ago, when horse-drawn buggies delivered ice to keep food cold and laundry dried on ropes in the sun, fires were fought with buckets, axes, and hand-pulled carts with water hoses. So if you look, all the people are running. They're running to help. In one little town on a moonless night, a cry rang out, "Fire!" Out of bed the townspeople leapt. As they lined up in bucket brigades, they lent their voices to the rising cry. "Get the hose cart! Grab the buckets!" Volunteer firefighters ran through the night toward the wooden shack where the firefighting equipment was kept. They threw open the doors, but it was dark inside and hard to see. "Light a lantern!" one man yelled. "Hold it high!" cried another, as they reached inside the pitch-black shack, wheeled out the hose cart, and raced to put out the fire. Volunteers are people who work doing something for free. They give their time. So in this case, volunteers to put out the fire, that is not their job. They're just doing it to be kind and helpful. Finding firefighting equipment in the dark was not easy. Then one day, a businessman gave the firefighters a gift. No longer would they have to waste time lighting lanterns. A wire burning inside a ball of glass would light the way. Day after day, year after year, the light bulb did not burn out. Think about that. There was a time when people did not have lights like we have today. Instead, they would light candles or lamps that had oil in them, and they would light a flame on a wick. You know, light bulbs are actually kind of newer inventions. After 10 years, the wooden shack was gone, but the light bulb was not. In a firehouse with walls and windows, the 4-watt light bulb was never turned off. A soft orange light, it glowed no brighter than a handful of fireflies. Beneath the light bulb, firefighters polished the hose cart until it shined. Here's the light bulb. They would be marching in the little town's 4th of July parade. Flags waved, a band played, dogs barked, and children cheered as they marched on newly paved roads past businesses and homes recently wired with electricity. See the electric wires? And along with the clopping of horses' hooves, a new sound was heard. The loud, squeaky horn of a honk of a car's horn. You know, when my grandfather, he was actually my oldest grandparent, was a little boy, they didn't have electricity in their home, and they did not own a car. They rode horses everywhere. So my papa would ride his horses. He was actually an orphan when he was 7 years old, because he lost his mom when he was 2, and he lost his dad when he was 7. And so he and his 2 older brothers lived alone, and their aunt would check in on them. but he did not have any parents when he was just a little boy, so they had kind of a poor life, and they did not have electricity, which is crazy, isn't it? When my mom was little, they didn't even have a bathroom in their house. They had to go outside to what was called an outhouse to go to the bathroom, and my dad too. They always said they were scared to go to the bathroom at night, and I understand that. So back, when your parents probably grew up with those things in their homes like I did. But our parents and our grandparents and our great-grandparents, they didn't have all these wonderful things. If you look, you can see that light bulb, and now they've got their first cars. And there's still people with horses, because even though cars were invented, not everybody had one. But your home would have been heated with wood, and it would have had candles or lamps that had oil in them, and those would have been your lights. You wouldn't have had plug-ins for your radios. Those things just didn't exist back then. Day after day, year after year, the light bulb did not burn out. After 20 years, the light bulb was no longer the brightest in the firehouse. Other bulbs shine brighter during the day, and in the evening, after the sun had set, they illuminated the night. But to the firefighters, the 4-watt bulb was the most important. It burned when they left to fight a fire, and it was still lit when they returned. No longer was news of a fire spread by cries and shouts. When a fire broke out, townspeople could call the telephone switchboard operator. Oh, so now they have telephones. But not like the phones we have. The telephones run on wires. And you may have seen a show, but they would have to pick up the phone and ask for the operator, and then she would connect a wire to wherever they wanted to call. Volunteer firefighters who lived in their own homes and worked at separate jobs heard the town's fire bell ring and knew it was time to stop working on farms, in fields, in offices and shops. Off they went, not pulling a hose cart, but driving a brand new fire engine with a bell on top. Not as fancy as today's fire engines. Have you noticed, if you look at the pictures, the town is growing. It's getting bigger. Unfortunately, this has a rip in it. Now the town has really grown. Day after day, year after year, the light bulb did not burn out. There it is. After 30 years, cars were driven up and down the streets of the little town. Careful, look both ways, firefighters reminded children running to the theater where they could watch movies on the big picture screen for 25 cents a piece. Much cheaper than today. In the firehouse, a record spun on the record player as firefighters cleaned and inspected the hoses and the gauges, the wheels and the windshields. They checked their boots, their smoke masks, and the tools carried on their wide belts. Firefighters never knew when a fire would break out, so they needed to be ready. Things have really grown over the years. America's kind of a young country, but things have really changed, especially since my grandparents were little. Day after day, year after year, the light bulb did not burn out. After 40 years, trains rumbled into the newly built station. Airplanes flew overhead, and firefighters gathered around the radio to hear the day's news. All of a sudden, the siren blared beneath a light bulb that glowed strong and steady. Firefighters stepped into their big boots, pulled on their heavy coats, put thick helmets on their heads, and switched on their two-way radios. That's like a walkie-talkie. They drove through the growing town's only traffic signal, honking the horn. Instead of fire or smoke, they found a crowd gathered near a tree, pointing at a boy who had climbed too high and couldn't get down. It used to be a time, because the firefighters had those tall ladders, that they would get called for such emergencies. Day after day, year after year, the light bulb did not burn out. After 50 years, the little town was not so little anymore. Families moved into brand new homes and parked their cars in the driveway. And all over town, workers were busy building new schools, hospitals, highways, libraries, and ice cream shops. Look how different it looks. Same town, different time. Firefighters were no longer volunteers. They were paid employees who lived and worked in the firehouse. A refrigerator kept their food cold, and a stove heated it up. They vacuumed with a vacuum cleaner, watched television on a black and white TV. That would be when my mom was little. They only had a black and white TV, no color TVs. And at night, they slept beneath the glow of the 4-watt bulb. So that's about the time my parents were born. Day after day, year after year, the light bulb did not burn out. After more than 60 years, on television sets across the big town, everyone watched something they had never seen before. A man walking on the moon. That happened when my dad was 18 and my mom was 14 years old. It actually was only about 6 years before I was born. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, the light bulb burned strong and steady above the heads of firefighters who practiced, trained, and were always prepared. So that was in the late 1960s. I think it was 68, but I feel like I might be saying it wrong. Day after day, year after year, for 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70 years, the light bulb glowed. But in 1976, it stopped. The firefighters were moving to a new firehouse, but not without their light bulb. The light bulb, the socket, the cord, and the porcelain outlet that attached it to the ceiling were carefully removed. Fire engine lights flashed and sirens blared, flags waved, a band played, dogs barked, and children cheered as the light bulb, the star of the town's parade, was driven to its new home. The little boy with the light bulb. So this would probably been when I was a little girl. All eyes were on the electrician as he reconnected the light bulb.
What is this meal?
Would it light? Sorry guys, I'm starting a meeting, so hold on a second. Let me mute everybody. Would it light? Would it still glow? A second passed and then another. The bulb did not light. The people held their breath. The light bulb still did not light. The electrician jiggled the switch, and then the bulb, as it always had, flickered and started to glow. Can you imagine something that old lighting? Light bulbs don't last like that anymore. Day after day, year after year, the light bulb did not burn out. After 80 years, the light bulb stood guard over the fire engines from 15 feet above. School children came to the firehouse to learn about fire safety. The men and women who worked as firefighters explained how they raised the ladder on the hook and ladder truck, how they breathe through oxygen masks, and why they wear fire retardant uniforms. Fire retardant means that it's a uniform that keeps fire from spreading on it. Beneath the glow of a 4-watt bulb, they taught children to stop, drop, and roll. You guys hear all those kids coming in for our lesson? Day after day, year after year, the light bulb did not burn out. 90 years after the cries of townspeople alerted firefighters and a light bulb help them find their equipment in the dark. A 911 call could be made, and computers would pinpoint the exact location of the emergency call. With sirens blaring and red lights flashing, firefighters, paramedics, and police cars raced down the crowded streets of the city. They raced past halogen, fluorescent, and incandescent lights, past neon and strobe lights, traffic lights and street lights, motorcycle, car, truck, and bus lights. Driving through the night, help was on the way. And this is like today. You can hear those kiddos. Day after day, year after year, the light bulb did not burn out. After 100 years, it was time for a birthday party. The town turned out to celebrate. Television and radio crews set up their gear. Speeches were made, pictures were taken, birthday cake eaten, and happy birthday sang to a 100-year-old light bulb that had never once burned out. That's pretty amazing. Now, strong and steady, it still glows above the heads of firefighters. It burns when they leave to fight a fire and stays lit after they return. So, back here in the back, this is the story of, in 1901, Mr. Dennis Bernal, owner of the Livermore Power and Light Company, gave the volunteer firefighters of Livermore, California, a 4-watt light bulb made of carbon filament and hand-blown glass. So it really happened. I will take a picture of this if you want to read it with your family so that you have time. But I'm off to teach you a lesson. Have a great day. Bye.